Today, I'm going to try to draw another church courtyard here in Krakow, Poland, and holy cow, I'm standing again. Well, this time it's not such a big deal since I have this railing to rest my sketchbook on, which did admittedly feel a little precarious being perched up high on the edge like this, but it made for a much better standing experience than usual. So for this drawing, I have a rough idea of where certain lines will lie within the frame. And I'm going ahead and marking those right away so I can ensure that I stick to those proportions as I work through the rest of the drawing. Sounding familiar? So for example, the bottom of the yellow building on the left, I'm placing somewhere around the bottom third line. And the bottom of the green roof on the right will go roughly on the top third line. You can see in the reference that these are by no means perfect placements, but I don't know. It was just how I was seeing it with my eyes in the moment. After setting up these reference shots on the left, I've tried my best to avoid paying too much attention to it as it's recording, because it's dangerously easy to cement that image in my mind. I never want that image to undermine the real life version of the scene in front of me. I'm doing these drawings in the field because it's, the flower I want to water. If I wanted to draw from photo references or for whatever dumb reason video references, I could do that from anywhere. Instead, I'm doing it this way so that I can learn to draw what's in front of me. And part of that process is distilling a three-dimensional world down to two. When seen through the lens of a camera, shapes and angles become much more obvious, albeit still difficult for me to comprehend. And that makes transferring them to the page much simpler. In the real world, seen directly through the eyes, those shapes and angles and much more become much less distinct. Instead of everything plainly laid out, objectively so, angles can look completely different based on how you are contextualizing them. Shadows can appear subtler, proportions can get skewed because, I don't know, some things feel further away than others, and on and on and on. So when I go to set up the camera to video these references, I am conscious of the framing, among other things. But once I hit record, I have to immediately try to put it out of my mind. Because if not, I'll have two sides of me battling for control of the pen. Instead, I want to do everything in my power to limit my exposure to the scene in two dimensions, so that I can commence the drawing with fresh eyes, absorbing the three-dimensional scene before me. It makes this whole process a lot more difficult, but because it's what I would like to be good at, it's what I need to practice. So yeah, some of the proportions here may be imperfect. They are imperfect. And it's because, well, number one, I'm not very good at this. But number two, more relevantly, what you're seeing, and more precisely, I'd say feeling when you look, if that makes sense, when you look at the video reference, that's different from my experience standing there in real life. Even something as simple as peripheral vision can have a huge effect on what these things look like. Photography has helped me sort of rein in what I think of as like over-eager perception, but it's still very much there. And this process of drawing has only reminded me of its presence. Whenever I walk up to a possible scene, along with all the thoughts that race through my brain, like, is the lighting okay? Is there enough movement going on? Or will I be able to even draw this at all? If it's a scene like this that you're seeing, I'm simultaneously soaking it all up and trying to ignore as much extraneous detail as possible. For instance, my view of this scene extends so far beyond the frame that you're seeing here in every single direction. So it's important to know what's worth observing versus ignoring. Candidly, the camera setup does help me with that part of the process. I'm forced to ignore huge swaths of the scene simply to the limited field of view through the lens. As long as I don't let that composition affect how I see the scene, though, but let it prescribe the general framing instead, I think I can have my cake and eat it too. That's how it feels, at least. And quickly on that note, I've considered picking up one of those attachable telephoto phone lenses so that I'm not limited to this single focal length. Because I found that my eye for a subject or scene is a little bit longer than my phone lens. Maybe that comes from photography, which means what I initially see in a reference has to be marginally altered. And I really don't like that. I want to be able to just draw what catches my eye. I use an older base model iPhone for these videos, so I don't have the dedicated longer lens that some of the newer models have. But maybe one of those attachable, removable ones could get the job done. That being said, I don't know the first thing about them. So if they're junk and you know they're junk, please let me know so I don't waste my time or money. I do have the wide angle lens on my phone, which I guess I'm reserving for something particularly tall, but I'd really rather not use it if I'm honest. I just don't think it looks very nice, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so this is maybe one of my favorite references so far. I think the composition is really nice with the towering buildings on the sides and that path down in the center that juts out from below. The layering is interesting as well, and I think it could have been even better if somehow I was able to get an even higher view. I didn't know what to expect of myself here, especially regarding the perspective, but actually, since I'm up high, I'm actually in an adjacent tower. That meant that most of the scene was level with me, save for the path, which is so simple, it really wasn't an issue. Scenes like these, I venture to guess, will be a theme here in Krakow. This is already the third churchy sort of reference, and if you include the tower from a few days ago, all but one of my Poland videos consists of some old-looking architecture. In fact, that theme will probably extend well past my time in Krakow. Okay, at this point, I've realized that what interests me most in the scene is already on the paper. So I treated myself to some details. Drawing details is awkwardly my favorite yet most difficult part of the process. So I love them, but I also recognize how finicky they can be and how my own ignorance can turn them into poison on the page. Whatever, though. In this one, I had a good time with the details, and I was happy to add that little bit of intrigue early on before filling in the rest of those big shapes. On that note, I'm sure you've noticed by now that shading isn't really a part of the process right now. Every so often, I'll shade things here or there, but I've recently realized how it's handicapping my process a bit. I think I need to dedicate more of my time to getting the simple stuff down first. I want shading to be a crucial part of my drawing in the future. I don't want to simply improve upon line drawings forever. That's not exactly my favorite style, but I think this is what I need for now. I think by giving myself a little bit more slack than I originally thought necessary, in terms of realism especially, I will better build and reinforce a structurally sound foundation out of which I can expand. In my opinion, such a foundation would consist of perspective, line work, and just a general understanding of how to accurately represent a subject or a scene. I don't currently know when shading will take a more central role, hopefully sooner than later, but I think I'll know when it happens. The same can be said for every other technique, the overwhelming majority of which I am undeniably ignorant. Will there come a time when I need to learn anatomy, for instance? I have no idea. So on my intermittent search for knowledge that I've spoken about on the World Wide Web, I stumbled upon something I was vaguely familiar with, something I've never quite understood, and that was blind sketching or blind contour drawing or whatever else people call it. I knew what it was. I mean, it's in the name. But until last night, I didn't understand the purpose at all. There's a photographer I follow online who will share their blind sketches every once in a while. And I always thought, like, hey, why not blind sketch? It's only going to look better. If you don't know, blind sketching is where you look at the reference, but not down at the paper, not until you're done anyway. Well, I learned that it's more of an exercise than anything, and now I feel stupid. That's actually all any of this is. It's just an exercise in accepting my own stupidity and demonstrating it to the public. So yeah, it apparently has something to do with shifting control away from the analytical side of the brain, the left side of the brain, if I remember correctly, since you're unable to critique your movements as they occur. That leaves the right side of the brain, which is more adept at things like spatial awareness, creativity, imagination, and so on, to its own devices, letting the artist see a different side of their own creativity, exhibiting sort of how letting go can help with the creative process. So I did one. I used a photo of a city skyline as a reference because that's what the guy on YouTube used. Actually, I think it might have been Toby Sketchloose again. I've mentioned him before on the channel. Such a great resource. Check him out. Anyway, so I picked a random city skyline, looked at it for a while, grabbed my pen and started drawing, making sure to keep my eyes fixed on that reference. When I was done, I had a sketch that didn't look like I'd made it, and I mean that in the best way. I don't mean to denigrate my own work, but you get it. It looked like the drawing had a style all its own, and then you realize that the sketch came from you. This came from me. I made it, and I didn't overthink it for a second. My lines were smooth and confident, and while it hardly resembled the actual reference, there were aspects of it that looked more purposeful and professional than any of my, what I would call real drawings. At the end of the day, like I said, this is just an exercise, although I imagine there are artists out there who use it as a technique in their work, but it's one that illuminated something for me, and it will surely not be the last time I put that to use. Well, as I look at the overall, what would you say, substance of this drawing, and most pertinently the massive texture in the bottom left-hand side, I'm struck with the thought that this might make for a decent foundation to paint over. I don't know how to paint, clearly. I don't even know how to draw. But I have seen other people paint, and this roughly reminds me of the types of sketches they would start with. Maybe take away some of the finer details here, especially what I just referred to as texture in the bottom left. And I'd have what I think would be a pretty good starting point. When I look at that bottom corner, I'm thinking about how ambiguous it is in the drawing. If I were to paint over it, though, well, no. If someone who knew how to paint were to paint over it, what it's made up of would become so much clearer. If I did it, it would be a splotch of green and gray, so that's not my point. But by painting it, the reality of it becomes apparent. It's much more apparent. I'm not saying any of this to say that I should jump into painting. On the contrary, I'm just making an observation that this, as I'm nearing the end, looks like barely the beginning for a painting. And if anything, that's motivating me to persist. I don't want these to look unfinished for the rest of time. I want to be able to unambiguously render values and textures and all the rest of it. Right now, I feel like I'm deep into getting my bearings. Like I've not exactly headed off just yet, which is fine, but that I'm still just getting a lay of the land. With all of that, I would like to eventually transition into painting. That's a big, very far away goal of mine. And I think it's because, well, painting is amazing for one, but deeper than that, I have many paintings and painters that I simply adore, and I can't honestly say the same for drawing. At some level, and maybe this undermines my previous point, unless they're hyper detailed drawings, they tend to seem unfinished or like practice, like sketches in a painter's notebook. So there's a part of me that wants to be this expert in drawing, but there's another part of me that just wants to use that as a foothold to be a really good painter. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, so maybe it's just another way for me to have my cake and eat it too. Okay, so I feel like I'm on a little bit of a hot streak over here. I'm liking it. It could use some shading or color, both of which I mentioned, but I'm liking the direction things seem to be headed. Of course, it still looks pretty amateur, but that's just where I'm at. So what do you think? Please let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe, tell your friends, other standard YouTube farewells. Anyway, I really appreciate you for taking the time to watch this video. Seriously, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.